everybody. Welcome, and apologies again for the technical issues on our end. But happy that we all are here in the right space again. So we will begin. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining for the first ever Youth Organizing Education Justice District 7 City Council Candidate Forum. I'm going to be your moderator. My name is Dr. Malshad Janshal, and I'm the lead organizer and coordinator of the Liberation Program of the Brotherhood Sister Soul. For more than 25 years, the Brotherhood Sister Soul has been at the forefront of social justice, educating, organizing, and training to challenge inequity and create opportunity for all. With a focus on Black and Latinx youth, BroSis is where young people claim the power of their history, identity, and community to build the future they want to see. This forum is made possible by the work of our staff, youth, and organizers, and we are excited, especially excited, to have you all speak with the youth of the Liberation Program. Those are the young people you'll see on the screen. They'll be the young people asking questions and largely leading a lot of the energy behind doing this in the first place. They have all offered questions, and the compilation of those questions are that which will be asked today in this conversation. The purpose of this forum is to prioritize youth issues and voices on topics including educational equity, student wellness and mental health, transformative support, transformative justice, but also broadly speaking, criminal justice, inequity, and inequality in our communities. We believe that all plans for the future of New York City must be community and youth-led, and I'm sure a lot of you agree on that. And so in deciding who our district's future city council member is, we who can vote support candidates who share similarly situated visions for the future of New York City. In our conversation today, each candidate will have 60 seconds to respond to each question, and we'll answer in rotating order that I will share before the question is even asked. And youth again will be asking the questions. As a reminder, and potentially new information now that I think about it, we have Spanish translation. We have a Spanish translation line. And if anyone needs translation, please call 718-550-0056. And that number will be the number at which you can talk to our translation folks or our folks translating into Spanish on that line. And they will be translating directly from this call. And so, keep that in mind to the folks who are on this call, and definitely keep your pace a little slower. I know 60 seconds isn't a lot, but that will definitely support our translators on the other end. So we can begin. Oh, sorry. Si necesitas traducción, el número es 718-550-0056. And so I butchered that, but my apologies. And so we're all learning here. And our first young person to ask a question will be leading us off, and that is Emanuela. And the order for this question is we're going to Sean, and then Marty, and then Dan, and then Stacy, then Maria, and then Carmen, and then Ray, and then Luis. Emanuela, you can start us off.
Hi, my name is Emanuela, and my question is, what is your vision for the future of NYC, specifically as it relates to youth, Black and Brown youth, LGBTQ plus youth, youth with disabilities, undocumented youth, and other marginalized young people? What are your tangible goals for realizing youth power and leadership if you become the member of the City Council? And how will you center youth at decision-making tables?
Well, that's a very excellent and loaded question, but it's nonetheless a very good one. I appreciate the question. So I'm Sean, and look, I am one of you guys, right, in many ways. I attended schools in Washington Heights and Uptown Manhattan. I attended after-school programs in Uptown Manhattan. And I know the impact that programs like Brotherhood, Sister Soul, and so many after-school programs have on our kids, which is why I'm pushing for universal after-school. I'm also fighting to expand the community-to-school model, right, to increase mental health services, recreational activities, food pantries, and expanded learning opportunities. I'm also fighting to make sure we increase civic education curriculums in our public schools so that our kids and our students can know how to get involved civically and understand the power of politics and the power of our government. And I'm fighting for life. Did I reach my time?
No, you have 15 seconds.
Okay, and so look, this is one of our big issues, is fighting for youth and education. I served on the community board on CB9, where I was very involved on the Youth and Education Committee. And so I'm very, very committed to this issue.
Thank you. Next person, Marty.
Thank you everyone for hosting tonight. I'm Marty Allen Cummings. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I'm excited to be joining you all. The voices of our youth and our young people are vital to our city's future. So we need to open the doors of City Hall to welcome young people into the decision-making table. Even if you're not of voting age, your life is being impacted by the decisions voted on in City Council. So your voice has to be represented. So my office will welcome you into the decision-making table when we're voting on the budget, when we're talking about legislation for our schools, because I want to know how to best be of service to you, the young people. We need to make sure that our police are being held accountable and aren't attacking and harassing young people. We need to make sure we're funding arts programs and services in our schools and after school programs, having SYEP available, funding community-based organizations like yours so you have the proper resources to thrive and survive. And we also, in our school system, is at the, I can't see the clock, but in our school systems, we need to have expanded food programs. Sean talked about people experiencing food insecurity, which I agree with. We need to expand our food programs and services, and in lower income communities, make sure our schools are outfitted with food programs and health centers so young people can see a doctor, get the care they need, and have the support they need for good mental health care, physical health, spiritual health. These are key components. Thank you. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Thank you. You were getting in, and I want to dig in more when we have follow-up questions. Next speaker, Dan.
Hi there, I'm Dan Cohen. I'm also a product of the New York City public school system, and now my wife and I are raising our son, who's 8 and also attending New York City public schools. So funding the public schools and making sure that the schools get the resources they need is critical for me. I've seen how the schools' distribution of resources is unequal. I'm pleased now that the Coalition for Fiscal Equity Alliance for Quality Education lawsuit is finally coming to resolution, and there's $4 billion that's going to come to New York City public schools, and not just the money, but how we spend that money, and trying to even out the inequities in the system so that the parts of the district, particularly in the northern part of District 3 and District 5 and District 6 school districts, get the resources that they need. It also means funding CUNY, because your question is excellent. Didn't specify young people as an age limit. I mean, it could be young people, could be my kid who's 8, it could be someone who's 18 or 28. And I think what we're looking at is also trying to fund CUNY to make sure it gets the resources that it needs there as well. And lastly is sort of, I think, taking some of the security out of the school system, the sort of the school to prison pipeline, which punishes disproportionately Black and brown children and gives them a police record even before they finished elementary school, is something we have to move rapidly away from as well. I think that's the end of my time.
Yeah, we will definitely get into that as well. I appreciate all the rich conversations already happening at the beginning. Stacy?
Wow, Dan, I respect you're really on point with timing. So I'm going to try and be equally as short and sweet. Listen, I'm a product of this district. I'm a daughter of District 7. And I'm a true believer in creating healthy and safe environments for our kids, our babies across the district. I will call you babies throughout the night because y'all are our kids, right? And so one of the things that I'm thinking of, obviously I'm a strong proponent of community schools. I received the endorsement of the teachers union because I'm a firm believer in community schools. We need less police and more mental health services throughout the district. I want to create a private public parent teacher fund so that there's true equity across the district. I know that there are pockets where there's more money than others. I want to really invest in our communities. And then also career development, not just SYEP, but what do kids want to do further in their life?
Thank you.
Right on the money.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. And going to Maria Ordonez.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Ordonez, and I'm a candidate for City Council in District 7. And no offense, Stacey. I mean, if they're all babies, that means I'm a baby running for City Council.
And you're my baby too. I love you.
I'm 21 years old and I'm running for City Council. So I'm probably around the age of all of you right here. all of the youth of this organization.
Mhm.
And what I want to tell you is that nothing can stop you. You should be able to run for office if you want to. And that is part of my platform, to empower the youth. You're not babies, you're leaders. We need to make sure that we, as one of my colleagues said, universal after school programs. As someone who is a product of the public school system, we need to make sure that everyone has access to these resources that really transform children's lives. We need to make sure that we're taking police out of schools, that we're providing mental health services. And at the same time, it's not just elementary, middle school, and high school. It is getting into college. So as someone who was endorsed by PSE CUNY, I'm an advocate for the New Deal for CUNY to make sure that CUNY is actually tuition free and we can all afford to go to college and not have to face student debt. We need to empower each and every one of us so we're part of the decision-making table and we finally have a voice.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And more on the New Deal in time. Next, we have Carmen Quinella.
Good evening, guys. I hope everybody's doing fine and had a good day. Today was one of them days where you just can soak everything in and have some serenity. So I hope everybody did that. Thanks for your invitation. I look forward to this conversation. When it comes to the children, let me tell you, I have 19 grandchildren and 12 great grand. So this is very dear to me on what we do with our children. I have been very active when it comes to our young people. Right now, before when I left a few minutes ago, one of my young men came that I have working. And it's very essential, especially for our men, to have jobs. Young men to have jobs and keep them off the corners. I used to teach math and English for Kaplan, and saw the disparities of our children that were living in shelters and how they couldn't concentrate in the schools. There is so much to be done when it comes to our school system. So, when you talk about what we're going to do for our children, listen, I'm all in. I have too many grandchildren not to be in, and making sure that we do what we have to do for them. Right now, it's all about them. I have created jobs right here. I'm the president of Douglas Houses. I have 2,900 residents. So every day, 24 hours a day, someone's calling me with some type of problem. And we've created OSHA, fire and safety. Our children have taken those courses and they are working. So what am I doing? I'm already doing it. I don't talk the talk. I walk the walk every day, every day, every day. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. And now to Ray.
Thank you for having me, and it's such a privilege to talk to you all. I grew up in a NYCHA project. My mom came from Costa Rica on a tourist visa, overstayed. That's what we call undocumented. When I was 7 years old, my mom woke me up and said, "We're going across the bridge. You're gonna meet your dad." Met my father when I was 7 years old in rehab. Grew up, graduated with PS 110, and lifelong Manhattanite. And I share that stuff only because I just want y'all to know that I know challenges are real. Growing up in the projects is real. Growing up in the street is real. And if it wasn't for the boys club in New York, I don't know, I would have gotten out, right? And that was always the biggest fear my mom had. In terms of my vision for youth, in addition to running on a platform of class size, reducing class size, and hiring more teachers, I want to scale the work we're doing at Arate Education. Arate Education is a nonprofit I've been on the board on for almost 10 years now. And we cut out the middleman, which is the bureaucracy, the DOE. We get millions of dollars from the city and state that we get into after-school programs, summer programs, internships, and the proof is in the performance of the students. We were a middle school that we grew into a high school, and because we do so well providing resources year-round, our kids are staying with us, and we have amazing college placement, amazing internship placement, and it's a huge success that's been covered in the Daily News. So sorry for going over, but that's a kind of model I want to scale because it's so successful in the South Bronx.
Awesome. This is a 90-minute conversation, but there's so much that I want to just dive into when each of you speak, and maybe that's not now, but it will be at some point during the rest of this campaign trail. Okay, so thank you all. I will not ask a follow-up question on this one because we are going to get into some of those later. But thank you, Manuela, for the question. So for the 2020-2021 school year, New York City provided 57% of the budget for New York City public schools. And I know that one of you mentioned the campaign for fiscal equity monies with $4 billion coming back to New York City over the course of the next 3 years, or 4 years, including this one. And we're excited about that, right? But the reality is that even with the COVID-19 pandemic, elected officials will have to fund our schools in a way that our students deserve now more than ever, especially because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so with a spending gap in New York State that is around the difference between wealthy districts and poor districts is around like $10,000 per pupil. Our first question to begin, and not just the opening question, our first question to begin is specifically about funding. And that question is going to come from Nabitu.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, the last part.
Okay. Better. Okay. My name is Nabitu, and my question is: NYC schools and communities that are predominantly Black and Latinx are over policed, under resourced, and criminalized youth. Do you support divesting from school police and investing in student support staffs? Furthermore, if elected, will you increase the number of guarantee now our school will be funded but also police free?
Okay.
Is it just me, or was that kind of?
Yeah,
No,
there
I
were.
think, yeah.
I mean, it's exemplary of what's been happening for learning online. But I will read the question. Thank you, Nabitu. I'll read the question again, and hopefully Nabitu can get better Wi-Fi so that she can hear the responses, because I know she's really invested in the responses to this question. And so the question reads: New York City schools and communities that are predominantly Black and Latinx are over-policed, under-resourced, and criminalize youth. Do you support divesting from school police and investing in student support staff? Furthermore, if elected, will you increase the number of student support staff and services in New York City public schools and guarantee that not only will our schools be fully and equitably funded, but also police free? The order for this question is Marty, Dan, Stacy, Maria, Carmen, Ray, Luis, and Sean. Marty.
Well, thank you so much for that question. First of all, off topic, we need to fight for universal broadband so everybody has good access to Wi-Fi. It's a right. Everybody should have it. But yes, we need to get cops out of schools and practice real restorative justice and put those resources into guidance counselors, mental health care services, work with organizations like Make the Road, who are working hard on this, work with Kids PAC, which has endorsed us to fund these services, and school districts like the Bronx School District 9 that's been working really hard to integrate the schools successfully have been awarded grants. Make sure we're offering those grants to schools. You know, your zip code should not dictate your education. We shouldn't have police in our school system. We should be enriching and supporting our young people. Not, I think Dan mentioned this at the beginning, you know, the school to prison pipeline. Kids are having a record before they even graduate school because of the over policing of our Black and brown and immigrant communities. So we need to invest in this restorative justice. We need to make sure that we're using money from the new marijuana laws to put that money back into community, that we're taxing the wealthy, putting that money in, and the police budget is inflated. We have a militarized police budget. Put that money back into the community. We don't need to be spending $600 million on police overtime. We need to be funding our young people and safety for our young people in our schools.
Agreed. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for the time.
So the challenge of following Marty is because it's basically like what he said, what they said. I agree with Marty's points, but even including the broadband comment, I think we need to do that as well. The challenge for the school system is both about the money and also about where we're spending that money, and the inequity in the system is such that you have districts which are wildly disparate. quoted $10,000, which sounds actually even, I think, low. One of the things I've seen in District 3 in Manhattan and then in District 15 in Brooklyn is they've been reducing the screens or eliminating them entirely. You have geographic patterns that people live in communities, and that has reinforced segregation within the schools. But if you take away the screens for elementary schools and you make it a lottery-based system, you begin to redistribute people within school districts, even if they're not where they live. You be able to move resources around within the district itself. And I think we should look at eliminating the screens for all elementary schools. And I would, in fact, get rid of them for middle schools as well, which I just think reinforce segregated patterns and reinforce the current inequities in the system. I'll stop there on my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Stacy?
So I agree with Dan and Marty, but I will add my own some additional things to this. But let me start by saying that Maria is right. You are the future leaders, and so we need to create a safe and healthy environment, and that includes removing the feeling of enforcement within your school system. So I do agree we need to remove officers from out of all public schools throughout the city, including District 7, especially in District 7. And we need to go a little bit further. I think, there are still schools that have metal detectors and the feel of law enforcement. So we need to remove that feeling within the school so that people, when they go inside their school, they feel like they're getting an education and it's a warm feeling, right? In addition to that, I think we need to really invest in community schools. That holistic feeling that you receive at Brotherhood Sister School needs to be in every school across the district, where families can get resources in addition to the children and kids that receive education from their particular school. And so, there's a long list of ideas that I have on my website, Stacy for City Council, and we can have this conversation forever. But I defer my time to Maria and others.
Thank you, Maria.
All right, so I agree with what has been said by Stacy, Marty, and Dan. We're pretty much on the same page here, but I'm gonna add on a little bit more. I am a Latina from West Harlem, and my family, we grew up here, my other brothers, and I still remember the day when my oldest brother came back home and told us that he was stopped by the police because he had to go through a metal detector and his belt had metal, so he was searched, and because he was a man of color. So that is unacceptable. That needs to stop now. We need to remove all metal detectors. We need to remove all police from schools. And we need to ensure that we are following a community-based idea for our schools. And we're making sure that students are leading the way. We need to make sure that every child has access to a library. I still remember going to Columbia Secondary School and not having a library. We had to share space with a charter school and another public school. We need to make sure that every school has space for themselves. We're not sharing with charter schools. We need to make sure that we're empowering our public school students and ensuring that they have access to the internet, access to technology, especially through this pandemic, and have the resources so they can thrive.
Thank you. Carmen?
Well, let me say that I agree with almost everything everyone has said here. I think we're echoing all the same thing, but let me go a little further. We really have to look at the books. We have to see where that money is going. And not only that, when I was growing up, we had guidance counselors, we had religious instructions, we had things with morals and values, and that is, taken out of the schools. Like I said, I have 19 grandkids and 12 great grands. So I'm always in the school system. If you notice the picture that I have there, that's Westside High School. I am on that board. And we have a lot of young people there with differences. But if we do not battle the thing of housing, most of these kids are in shelters. So many that it is unreal. And if they don't have a place to lay their heads, we can't even begin to talk about what's happening in the schools. We need to make sure that their home base is taken care of. And that's my main thing. The housing. for our young people. And it seems to be the biggest problem that we have is housing.
We will definitely touch on housing as well. Thank you for that. Ray?
You're welcome.
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues here. You know, we definitely need to get police out of the schools. We over criminalizing, over penalizing young people. You know, when I was looking through the BroSis Instagram, one of the posts I noticed was a article about the lack of guidance counselors, and that really hit home for me because one of the programs that we run through the LUL Foundation, the La Unión Latina Foundation, is called Y Tú También. And it started, you know, La Unión Latina Foundation started really as just a scholarship program. And what we found was that, you know, again, we had all these kids under applying from, and they were going to some of the quote unquote, you know, the specialized high schools and whatnot, a mix of first generation kids under applying to colleges. And so we started Y Tú También as a college access program, and it grew like wildfire because word of mouth, because kids started telling other kids. And next, you know, it started off as a simple program in the space above the Whole Foods on Chamber Street, has grown across I don't know how many different high schools, and year after year, you know, again, we were in the Daily News for our college placement, you know, like whether it's Arte, Y Tú También, like there are programs that work that are driving success, and we got to scale them. And absolutely, the fact that even the quote unquote specialized high schools are underserving the college access program needs of their kids, that shows you how egregious it is across the city. So we definitely got to audit the NYPD and make sure that we're reallocating the money in a way that makes sense.
Thank you. And Sean?
I have a minute, right?
Yes, you have a minute.
Okay. So I mean, just to echo what all my colleagues are saying, I agree 100%. I attended George Washington High School. There are still metal detectors there. There were metal detectors when I was a student there. It definitely creates an environment of like law enforcement, which I think we need to do away with. And I think that, you know, like Stacy said, you know, the community school model is going to be very important for our students, you know, wraparound services from mental health services, recreational activities. Like Marty said, right, focusing on guidance counselors, support staff, mental health services. These are all things that we are going to have to focus on. And Carmen raised a very great point as well, right, which is the housing of young folks. There are so many there are thousands of, I believe hundreds of thousands of students who are homeless. And so we have to take a comprehensive approach to address this issue.
Thank you. And Sean, I have a follow-up question for you in particular. And so the question is about student support staff, especially, and this is informed by some of the young people who are texting me, which is why I'm like reading this. And also making sure that the folks in the schools who need the funds get the funds, right? So if we all believe in police-free schools, which it sounds like you do, so just noting that. Once our schools get better resourced, like where does that money go? How would you allocate money in your ideal school, especially when thinking about community schools in particular?
Yeah, well, you know, the full disclosure, I was endorsed by Local 372, which makes up the school aides and a lot of school staffers and support staff. Number two, when it comes to investment, you know, in an ideal school environment, we will fund more guidance counselors so that there's not one guidance counselor literally for 100 students. A lot of guidance counselors in many schools in Manhattan are focused on attendance rates, right? And, you know, not so much focused on, they're just struggling to get even students at school. And much less there's a focus there for, you know, college admissions and working with subject specific tutoring and things like that. So in an ideal school, I would invest in making sure that we have more guidance counselors and to increase the attention for our students and their needs. I will also make sure that we are fighting to bring a wide array of resources from mental health and psychological services. So yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of work to be done, and you know, we have a lot of policies on our website to that effect.
Thank you, and thank you for consistently being at the right time. Appreciate that. Our next question is. I will just read it. So according to the Community Service Society, New York City has always been known as a chronically tight, high-cost rental market. In recent decades, housing affordable housing to low-income New Yorkers has become more elusive, and homelessness has skyrocketed. The city's low-income population has remained fairly stable since 2000, with about 1 million households living below twice the federal poverty level. Yet the number of homeless families in shelters has tripled. These numbers are from 2018. And so we can all imagine that in this year, 2021, the numbers are more dire given the pandemic. We also know that Harlem, like many communities in New York City, is struggling under the weight of gentrification, displacement, and housing insecurity. And our next question is about just this, and it's coming from Mamfatu.
Hi, my name is Mamfado, and my question is, what will you do to address housing insecurity so as to ensure that residents of Harlem Heights live in safe and healthy environment, in spite of environmental races and dilapidated housing conditions, all while also combating rampant graphification and
Mamfatu, you cut yourself off because you got nervous, but I know you're really excited. So I will read the question because this is something that's near and dear to all of us. What will you do to address housing insecurity so as to ensure the residents of Hamilton Heights live in safe and healthy environments in spite of environmental racism and dilapidated housing conditions, and all while also combating rampant gentrification and displacement? The order is Dan, Stacy, Maria, Carmen, Ray, Sean, and then Marty. I will read it again, but Dan, you can start us off.
Thank you, ma'am. The issue about affordable housing is the number one issue for District 7, not just for Hamilton Heights, but broadly across the district. I've called for, by serving on Community Board 9, I've called for 1,000 new units of affordable housing in the district on 4 sites, which are currently owned or controlled by New York City, and would go a long way towards ameliorating some of the housing shortage in the district. I've also called for them to be at $40,000 a year or less of income for the people who rent them, because that's the area that the city has managed to largely overlook. The City Hall has made a mess of affordable housing in the past 8 years. It's largely ignored the homelessness issue and belatedly caught up to it by overinvesting in shelters. I support a policy called Housing First, which tries to get people into stabilized housing as quickly as possible and then deal with all of the conditions and their challenges in their lives afterwards. And also, I've been very involved in trying to make sure that we have equitable distribution of that housing. That we should be making sure that their housing end is in District 7, and I'm running out of time, where we need it the most as opposed to where it will be most accepted. Thank you.
Thank you. Stacy.
So great question. I'm just going to go through a couple of points because this is a very complicated issue. We need to assess the current affordable housing plan. I believe the current administration hasn't been as efficient as they should, and we have some vacant apartments. So we need to identify where we can actually place families and individuals. 2, we need to assess the AMI post-pandemic. I'm sure folks have lost their jobs, they're unemployed. And so what does affordable housing really mean post-pandemic? Second, we need to create a pipeline where those who are on the brink of homelessness, how do we support them? And those that are living in NYCHA, how do we support families that may want to live elsewhere? And those that are living in affordable apartments, how do we create home ownership? And then finally, we need to look at this as a public health issue.
Thank you. Housing is a public health issue.
I'll expand more later.
All right, so I'm a lifelong resident of 3333 Broadway, and from my window, I've seen the Columbia expansion. Literally growing up, I've seen how they have expanded into my community and created gentrification. So this issue is really dear and near to me, and it is an issue for District 7 and citywide. We are facing a housing crisis. So we need to make sure that we are housing the homeless. We're using vacant spaces in our community to house the homeless. There's no reason why we have so many hotels, we have so many vacant units already in District 7 in the city, and we cannot house the homeless. On top of that, we need to make sure that we're fighting against real estate. We're dismantling systems in place right now, like the mandatory inclusionary housing program that incentivizes private developers instead of supporting our tenants. We need to make sure to uplift their voices, to let them know that they have a right, they have the opportunity to speak up if they're facing landlord abuse. We need to make sure that we're expanding the right to counsel, and we're giving every tenant a voice. And ultimately, we also have to support people who are living in NYCHA. Public housing is very much part of District 7. We need to pass a Green New Deal for NYCHA to address the lack of repairs in NYCHA, create a jobs program, and ultimately help everyone live in a dignified home. Housing is a right, and everyone deserves a home.
Thank you. Carmen?
Well, baby girl, now you're really hitting home. I have been an advocate, especially when it comes to housing, for over 30 years. We are facing now the Blue Deal, the PAC, the RAD, and we're fighting against it. As Stacy said, and I'm glad Stacy's on board, but we have been talking about home ownership and resident management. It is very essential that we do that. And we need to make sure that we know what affordable housing means. It's low income housing that we need. We must not get that twisted. We must not get that twisted. It's not affordable housing that we need. It's low income. I have created a thing of Occupy NYCHA, which I have under me about 10 different presidents now, where we're fighting for home ownership and resident management. Again, this is something that's very dear to us, that we're going through every day. And until we do the homeless crisis, we shouldn't be talking about anything else. Because if you can't sleep, how are you gonna do anything else?
Right.
You can't.
Agreed. Thank you. Ray?
I'm on?
Yes.
All right.
You're on.
So 2 points I'm going to come at this with. One, from my time in government, where we literally leveraged, our capital dollars budget to create thousands of units of affordable housing. Via Verde, La Central, just thousands and thousands of units of rebuilding and building affordable and supportive housing when I was in the Bronx Borough President's office. But secondly, more recently, back in August, I took what I thought was going to be a short-term engagement with a homeless shelter organization. By the end of September, they made me CEO, and I've been running this nonprofit called Aguila since really it's October 1st. And it's, I've fundamentally believe we have to completely change how we deal with building supportive affordable housing. For the billions of dollars we've spent on bad nonprofits and bad landlords over the last, 30, 40 years, we could have built thousands of units of housing. And we have to fundamentally change the model. There's a public advocate puts a worst landlords list every year for the last 10 years. It's time to have consequences for being on that list. And I'm talking about taking those buildings and putting to work for you.
Thank you. Consequences to screwing over tenants. Hear that. Next is Sean.
Well, housing insecurity is something that is deeply personal. As I've said numerous of times, I went from being evicted as a child to becoming a tenant rights attorney, fighting for our families in housing court. Today, I held a press conference at Grand Houses calling for the federal legislation that Biden's putting forward in his infrastructure bill to include public housing, right? Ceilings and lead pipes. These are infrastructure. And so we have to make sure they're included as part of the federal fund. But to the points that have been made, we need to make housing available to extremely low income families. That's why we should apply the ELA term sheet, which is applied for the most low income families. We have to make sure that we are increasing set asides for families that are homeless, make sure they have long-term permanent housing. On top of that, we need to expand right to counsel, right? For families facing eviction, we need to make sure that you have access to a lawyer for free. But we need to build off of right to counsel, make sure that we're expanding it so that families making 400% above the federal power line are covered by this law, currently only 200%. 84% of families with attorneys get to remain in their homes. And so we know that by just simply knowing the law and having someone to help a family, the fact that can keep someone in their homes, and there's an 84% chance of that, is something to build off of. And so 3 seconds to go. So yeah, just count on me to be your champion.
Thank you for that. And then last but not least, Marty.
Yeah, it's like, folks were saying, housing is a right, a roof is a right, evictions are acts of violence, and evictions should not happen in our city or our state. We do need right to counsel, but we also need to end evictions. We need to expand public housing, expand low-income housing. Putting folks in hotels is a band-aid. We need long-term sustainable housing, in addition to social workers and mental health care providers and addiction specialists who can address the needs, because everybody experiences homelessness for a different reason. We need to make AMI hyper local, because 110th Street is very different from 155th Street, right? So we need to make sure we're making this hyper local. And we also need to fund safe havens and provide more safe havens, because I'm out on the streets at night during the week with Uptown Wagon, an organization I founded with our neighbors, providing PPE, clothing, and warm meals. I talk to people like Desiree, who live right off of Montefiore Park on the streets. She's scared to be in a shelter because it's not safe for her as a woman in a shelter. So we need to fund safe havens for women, trans people, for young people. I work with the Ali Forney Center for Homeless LGBTQ Youth. Trans women of color are scared to go in shelters because the city is saying you need to go to a men's shelter. They're not men, they're women. It's not safe to go to the women's shelter. So we need shelters that are going to help these women, help these people get into long-term sustainable housing, have access to CUNY, access to jobs, access to union apprenticeships. Thank you.
Thank you. Agreed. And so we're going to stay on the housing topic a little bit more. And so the question is to Carmen. And so the question is, what does your low-income housing plan to house the homeless look like if you're elected, and especially as it relates to tenant rights?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is turn it all over to the residents. That's where you get your power from. The residents need to lead. We need to take it out of the hands of Mayor de Blasio. Okay, the mayor has really been missing in action when it comes to housing. He has done nothing but throw us under the bus. And until we get rid of the leadership that is throwing us under the bus every day, well, nothing's going to change. We're gonna keep doing the same thing. We have to get rid of these elected officials that have been brought, okay, and continue to be bought. I mean, let's face it. Dan is my state committee man. Ask Dan how many times he's come into Douglas houses. I'm so tired of people with their bull. I walk, I don't talk the talk. I walk that walk every day. And I am tired of people taking advantage of my people. It's enough. Like I said, I have 2,900 residents that I do all day long. You don't have to be a lawyer to go and advocate in the housing court. All you have to do is know your stuff. Okay, so and anybody that knows me knows I don't back down from a fight. But we have to turn it over to the residents. It is resident management and home ownership. And I'm tired of also people calling it the projects. No, they're housing developments. So let's get that straight. I'm sorry, I get emotional here.
It's totally fine. It is an emotional issue. Housing is super important to our communities, and dignified housing, and also treating people with dignity. So I appreciate the passion and also the advocacy around what you're doing to support your residents.
Listen, I give out 17,000 pounds of food almost every 2 weeks. 17,000 from March until now. No elected official has come to give us anything. Okay, so I'm tired of all this crap. Enough is enough. We need to fight for what's ours.
Completely agree around fighting for what's ours. And also, we're going to talk about food insecurity. So, Carmen, you were just bringing up the topics before we get there. Before we get to food insecurity, we will stop at mass incarceration. So, we believe that well-resourced communities are safe communities, period. And to get to this, we have to commit to ending mass incarceration, over-policing, hyper-criminalization. The list goes on and on when it relates to the carceral state. It is imperative that the next city council member commits to supporting the work to close Rikers. And our next question is about just this, and we're going to pivot to Caleb.
Hi, my name is Caleb. The question I have today is, What do you plan to do to support efforts to #close Rikers, decarcerate NYC, remedy the problems caused by the criminal justice system, and support formerly incarcerated New Yorkers and their families?
Thank you. A very important question. The order for this question is Stacy, Maria, Carmen, Ray, Sean, Marty, and Dan. And I will
Great.
Dan. Mhm.
Let me know when you're ready. Set the clock. A very important question. While I was in the mayor's office, I was a key player, so to speak, with really mobilizing and organizing other elected officials to close Rikers, right? The reality is that our communities have been criminalized and over-policed for a very long time. So I would say to you, one, we obviously need to reinvest in our communities, right? I think the city is inefficient when we determine what we want to spend, how we want to spend it, right? And so we need to really be efficient about spending and reinvest in our communities. I think we need to have a hyper-local plan that involves community leaders. I think police officers need to live within these communities so that they know their neighbors. I believe that we need to, and I can keep going.
It is not enough time at all.
Give me another minute, 2 minutes.
We know it's not enough time, but there's just so much.
I know, but it's a critically important issue, which I value very deeply, and I'm willing to invest time, energy to advocate for this topic so that young men like yourself, Caleb, feel safe, but also not over-policed in our community. And I end there.
Thank you. Thank you. And also, so going to Maria and expanding the conversation to also all genders who are policed as well. Maria, what do you have to say?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this issue is really important for me as well. Growing up in West Harlem, I have friends, family that have been stopped by the police. And it is absolutely unacceptable that we are targeted because of the color of our skin. That needs to stop. We need to make sure that we are closing Rikers and they were putting that money back into our communities, or defunding the police as well, and putting that money into our communities to fund mental health care, to fund our schools, to fund our public housing, to support people in our community, and to create a just recovery from COVID-19. We need to make sure that we are investing in our communities and ultimately for creating a jobs program, vocational jobs for people who are coming right out of Rikers. People, when we close Rikers, we need to have a plan on how are we going to provide jobs, how are we going to provide education for people. We need to make sure that they have a just transition back into our community. We need to support them all the way through, and we need to lead the way with restorative justice, with community-led solutions, and we need to end the system of incarceration, end the system of oppression, because for too long, people like you and me have been oppressed by this system and wants to keep us in this cycle of oppression, this cycle of poverty. But that needs to end. And we can be that voice. We can be those leaders to end that.
We can and we are. Thank you, Maria. Carmen?
Well, I'm doing this work every day with my young people here. As you know, in the housing developments, we have a lot of crime, and we have to be really on the forefront. This is not something that's new. Like I said, I've been doing this 35 years, but I also believe that we need to really look at the core issue. And the core issue is that when they come out of being incarcerated, they have nowhere to go. They're being put in a shelter or an SRO, the same SRO that got them in jail, right? So we need to end that. We need to make sure, again, it all leads back to housing. And if they don't have a safe haven, we're going to have a revolving door. And all these issues is like a domino effect. So in order for us to do anything, we have to start at the core of the problem. And the core of the problem is making sure that families stay together, okay, and that they have somewhere to go when they come out of jail. And it's not a shelter, and it's not an SRO. We have to make sure that if they come, they did their time. If they did their time, guess what? They deserve housing.
Mhm.
They deserve a good job. And I've been doing that all along. I mean, my kids are working, and we're doing that every day. Like I said, I don't talk the talk, I walk the walk all day long, every day.
Thank you. Ray.
So the first thing is we have to get to a point where the police understand that a do-rag is not probable cause. A hoodie is not probable cause for a search, and we're not there yet. All right, we're not there yet. Bottom line is we're still racially profiling Black and Latino youth, and it's not hasn't gone away. I'm going to actually echo something that Carmen just said about people coming out of the prison system need a place to go, which is why I'm proud to say that one of the things we accomplished when I was in government was that we took the Fulton Correctional Facility, all right, we got the state to convey it to the Osborne Association, and we've created a very unique, one of a kind reentry facility out of a place that used to be a incarceration facility, right? The full Osborne reentry facility is a place, so yeah, because if you want to fight recidivism and keep people from repeating crimes when they get out of jail, you got to give them a roof over their head and a job. So I'm really proud of that model at the Osborne Station that we created to create a place for people coming out of Rikers to go. And yes, Rikers needs to be torn down, and we need local prisons and modern approaches that are worked in other cities like San Francisco to deal with to keep people in the communities where they are and have rehabilitative, not punitive justice.
Thank you. Rehabilitative, closing records. Yes. Sean.
I would say that absolutely we need to close Rikers. Moving forward, I am concerned of the conditions of the conditions under which the incarcerated community is living at Rikers, and something that we have to keep in mind. But at the end of the day, we have to address the root of the problem, right? The root of the problem is if you have people with stable housing, right, or access to good quality education, or access to to health services, then we wouldn't be seeing. I think that we would see crimes really plummet. I think that our government is really focused on the wrong investments and over policing when it should be focused on the root problems. Number three, in terms of recidivism rates, right, it's been said, right, we need to focus on transitional housing and transitional employment. On top of that, I think it's very important to fight for police accountability. I've also made sure to remove the police commissioners appointment to the Complaint Civilian Review Board, subject their appointment to the advising consent of the City Council and the Public Advocate's Office. And of course, I think it's important that we restore voting rights very much sooner for the folks who are coming out of an incarcerated community.
Thank you, Marty, and then Dan.
Sure. The conversation around reentry is so important. We need to provide housing, long-term sustainable housing, access to education, job services, work with our unions. My brother's been in and out of jail almost his entire, from the time he was a teenager to recently. And getting access to a job is really difficult. So we need to make sure that and access for our Black and Brown and immigrant communities who have been through the carceral system is even harder. We need to stop criminalizing the disease of addiction. I've been in recovery for 10 years. By the grace of God, I got sober, but we're criminalizing a disease that impacts Black and Brown people more, the criminalization of it. Get people the support and the help they need. There are people who are in jail right now who haven't been convicted of anything. They're just sitting in jail. We need to get them the support, get them out, get them housing, get them jobs, get them an education, fund this. The communities with the most resources are the ones with the least amount of crimes, not the ones with the most police. And yes, Rikers needs to be closed like yesterday.
Yes, thank you, Dan.
I support what my colleagues have said as well about closing Rikers and also repurposing it as a green energy facility, which is something we can do towards decarbonizing in addition to the decarceration strategy. Community board actually meets in a building at West 140th Street, or we did in the before times, that was run by the Fortune Society, which helps people who are formerly incarcerated reintegrate into society, and it has housing, the very thing that we've been talking about that Carmen first raised and a number of my colleagues have made reference to. And then with regards to defund the police, and Caleb, I appreciate the comment also that your name is Caleb because that's my son's name, is the idea that we have 36,000 cops now in New York City. 30 years ago, we had 24,000 police officers, and we have 100,000 felonies every year in this decade, and we had 500,000 felonies 30 years ago. So we have a lot less crime, 80% less crime, and we have a lot more cops, making our police force way larger than we need for what we for the crime that we're dealing with, and we can clearly reallocate those resources to other areas. And that is my time.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you, Caleb, Nabitu, and Mamfatu for the questions as well, and for asking the questions more specifically.
Can I add one more thing? Just one more thing really quickly. We need to also change how we look at crime, right, overall, right, and how we address crime. It really is a public health issue. And so the leadership, whether it's me or someone else, really needs to examine how to address the public health issues before we explore enforcement. That's it.
Okay, and Stacey, since you're already going, and I had a follow-up question, I will ask it to you. What does policing look like in District 7 when you, or if you are elected, and how will you ensure that the NYPD actually does whatever is dictated at that moment? We're doing a lot, and so let's say we get there, and how do you make that happen?
No, I mean, listen, it isn't easy. I actually had to do some of that work during the pandemic, and what was successful for me was really creating communities and work groups with residents and constituents in the community. I worked very closely with the commissioner, as well as the local commanders. I think the council member, myself as the council member, and other leaders throughout the district really have to create a community policing plan, right? That's hyper local for this particular community and involve the stakeholders, right? If I had my way to answer your question, I prefer like almost a hands-off, right, enforcement type. I don't think the police should address every issue. I think the police should only address serious issues, and they need to be invested in the people, the CBOs, and the businesses in this community. They need to be a part of the community.
Thank you. Thank you. So moving to the next question, and the speaker is going to be Wilhelmina. But before we get there, so according to City Harvest, even before COVID-19, New York City was facing a profound hunger crisis, particularly in the marginalized communities that City Harvest has long served. If you know City Harvest, in one of the world's most costly cities, more than 2.5 million working-age New Yorkers were struggling to make ends meet, again before COVID-19. Nearly 1.2 million New Yorkers were experiencing food insecurity, including 1 in 5 New York City children. Over 2 million New York City residents are food insecure right now. BroSis had provided 500,000 meals to our community since the advent of COVID-19. We administer a youth-run farmers market that brings over 30,000 pounds of food a year to 2,000 community residents, 1/3 of whom purchase with low-income health bucks. Our next question is about food insecurity, and I appreciate Carmen for bringing it up earlier. But Wilhelmina?
Can I hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Wilhelmina, and my question is, what is your plan to address food insecurity in our city, especially now that COVID-19 and resulting unemployment have exacerbated these issues in marginalized communities? What policies should be directed at the systemic issue, and what policies will you create to support responses like ours at BroSis? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Wilhelmina. The order is Maria, Carmen, Ray, Sean, Marty, Dan, Stacey.
Yeah, so that is a wonderful question. As we saw throughout the pandemic, food insecurity is a real issue, and not just throughout the pandemic, but even before. We need to make sure that we're ending food deserts. We need to make sure that we're providing access to farmers markets throughout the community, throughout Upper Manhattan. In District 7, it's unacceptable that only in the Upper West Side will I see a farmer's market, and when I go to Upper Manhattan, my farmer's market is a sea town. And we need to make sure we have access to fresh food for everyone. At the same time, we need to make sure that we're providing access to food to people who go to public universities. Oftentimes, the majority of people who go to CUNYs are Black and brown folks, you and me. So we need to make sure that they can go to school without being hungry. We need to make sure that no child goes hungry, to support the community-based organizations like you all are doing the work to provide food to the community, support mutual aid groups that came out throughout this pandemic, and support the work they're doing, and support the organizers who are on the ground and making sure that people have food at the table, because no one should ever go hungry.
Thank you. Next is Carmen.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. It's a very important question. And I think that it's really one of the main reasons I really decided to run, because I saw the desperation and the disparity in my community. And so, you know, I had to do something about it. There was no way that I could sit down, and not do anything, right? So we've been supplying food since the beginning of the pandemic, when all of our elected officials were hiding. Guess what? Me and my heroes were out there, and we're still out there. I do city harvest. I even have now. We definitely have a refrigerator, and the refrigerator is open 24 hours a day. I also do pantry. So we give food out all month long, all month long. That is something that that's a necessity, and there's no reason why someone can't eat. And again, it goes back to the housing issue. A lot of our people, even that can pay their rent, you can pay your rent, but then you have to decide whether you're going to buy food or pay your rent. And I go through this every day. Again, 2,900 residents. So there's nothing I haven't seen and nothing I haven't dealt with. And I guess to your question, Wilhelmina, first let me tell you, she is so gorgeous. I just looking at the picture of your baby, she's just gorgeous. But this is something that every day. Right. Every day. You see this all day long, every day. And it's heartbreaking that when our seniors couldn't get out, my heroes went door to door and made sure they ate. And this is what we need to do. We need to do that in every neighborhood. Make a buddy system that you check on your neighbors. And I'm sorry, my time is up.
No, thank you. Thank you. Especially about like communities helping themselves in the face of lack of support from community or from government leaders. Thank you for that, Ray.
So I'm going to come at it from two perspectives, but before I answer, I want to apologize as I do need to leave after I answer this question. I hate being double booked because I really want to keep talking to y'all, and so I apologize for having to leave early. In regards to food insecurity, two things I want to highlight. When I was in government, you couldn't use EBT for online purchases, right? We changed that and we launched a pilot program so that you could use EBT on Fresh Direct, and we expanded their delivery zone from a handful of zip codes to all over the entire Bronx. And that pilot program exists today, and that's what it's all about in terms of using technology to deal with food deserts, right? Because it's still a problem. The city has a great program called the Fresh Program, which subsidizes the opening of supermarkets, but we need to invest in that more. And lastly, I want to shout out State Senator Jessica Ramos. She did an amazing job during COVID in terms of bringing farmers directly into her districts. That's a model, again, another great model that was successful in terms of fixing the problem with the delivery system, right? So we have real inefficiencies in how we deliver food out of Hunts Point, and even though Hunts Point has gotten millions of dollars in city, state, and even federal subsidies. So fixing the food delivery model directly from farmers into communities that need them, expanding EBT online so that people can continue to eat, whether it's Fresh Direct or other more affordable online grocers, so people can use their EBT, and expanding the Fresh program. Thank you so much, BroSis. This has been amazing, and I feel terrible for having to leave, but you're in good hands with my colleagues, and have a happy Monday.
Take care, Ray.
Bye, Ray.
Peace, Ray. If you have seconds, if you want to say, just kidding. Okay, so next speaker, Sean.
So, food insecurity has been at the top of my agenda for a very long time. When the pandemic hit, I authored an op-ed in the Daily News calling for emergency food vouchers to provide direct food vouchers to families in need. We figured that getting money directly into the hands of people is the best way to give people flexibility of choice when it comes to food, especially to make sure that the foods are culturally, relevant as well, as opposed to having a paternal system where society is telling us what we should be eating. And so that's something that I care about, is choice in our foods. And so this would have helped out, undocumented immigrants who were excluded from federal benefits, but also college students. Hunger in college, on college campuses is a very dire issue, and this would have sought to address that. Number two, I also, proposed another proposal to make sure that voluntary food donations were given by, our restaurants and groceries, excess prepared foods, in exchange for reducing their licensing fees, which I thought would have been a creative way to incentivize small businesses while also addressing food insecurity. And so, yeah, I support a lot of the work that my colleagues here are supporting as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Marty?
Yeah, I mean, no human being should wake up hungry or go to bed hungry. And that's the reality of hundreds of thousands, millions of New Yorkers. So we need the expansion of SNAP to be permanent. We need a guaranteed income. We need a $20 minimum wage as a starting point in New York City. And we need to have a reparations fund in our city to make sure that our Black and Brown communities are provided funding from the new marijuana laws, that are going in. So that money is going into their pockets. So they're able to put food on the table for their families, have access to home ownership and small business ownership. I talked about this earlier, but we need to tax the rich, which is like not just a hashtag, but a very real thing. We have 120 billionaires in New York City who have made billions of more dollars while people are going hungry every single day. So we need, as city council members, to use our bully pulpit in the council to leverage that legislation in Albany to put that money back into the pockets of people most impacted. And I also mentioned this earlier in our school system, making sure we have health centers and food centers so the whole family can be served in these communities. Thank you, that's my time.
Thank you. Dan, and then Stacey.
I'd certainly build on what many of my colleagues have said. I would say also that the two populations that are most at risk are families and seniors. And we've been able to address a lot of family and senior issues through existing facilities. We've been through food services through the school system, even when school was not in session, by providing free meals, and then also through senior centers. Both of those need to be expanded. We need to have certainly more not-for-profits like BroSis that provide food assistance to people who don't fall into those two categories. Would be a start towards that. And then I guess some of the other things that my colleagues have said about providing vouchers would be a good step forward. Providing some of the funding that Marty mentioned as well would all be in the right direction. Those are all. I don't need to take in the next 20 seconds. I think those are the things that have been said that we need to do. Thanks.
Thank you. And then Stacey.
Okay, so I have a long plan. Food insecurity.
I yield my 20 seconds to Stacey.
Thank you, Dan. Food insecurity. Obviously, this has been an issue prior to the pandemic. And I think, there are two issues or 2 points we need to look at: availability and quality. And so on my website, I have a couple of solutions. Obviously, one is creating community-owned farms. I know Brotherhood Sister Soul has a community-owned farm. I think that's amazing. Increase the number of Grow NYC farmers markets that Maria alluded to earlier. Increase the number of green cart licenses available within the district. Again, Maria alluded to that earlier. Reassessing our SNAP benefit qualifications. Assessing existing local supermarkets in the district and the quality of food that is being sold, establishing a food wholesaler rating system like how we have in restaurants. You rate, the quality of food from different wholesalers, food pantries on college campuses that Maria recommended earlier. And then also, I think we need to create a hyper-local plan with local CBOs, restaurants, and residents to address food insecurity and the efficient use of food within our district. I think we don't use food efficiently within our district. I think restaurants and other food distributors, throw food away. We need to learn how to repurpose some of that. That was a mouthful, but there I go.
Thank you. And thank you for all the detailed answers from all of you. And because we're in a moment where we need detailed answers and like action. And so I look forward to what happens regarding food insecurity in our community, if any of you win this election. But to Marty. So Marty, you mentioned a lot about what you would do if elected, and specifically naming like using the bully pulpit, because some of these are also state issues. But regarding the like expansion of SNAP or the reparations fund, or specifically also the health and food centers, can you expand a bit more about what that would look like if you were elected?
Well, when I'm elected, I will use the bully pulpit of city council because I'm very loud, not as a council member. I'll be even louder as a council member. I'm sure some of you have seen me at different actions. I don't quiet down. But yeah, these are human beings' lives at stake. There's no time to skirt around the issue. I'm running because I'm tired of electeds running and saying they're going to do stuff. Then they get in office and say, oh, it's not in the budget. We don't have the money. We're going to do it next time. It is in the budget. We have $92 billion in the New York City budget. Where is that money going? Is it going to the people? The people who need help, who need food, who need housing, who need education? Or is it going to an inflated police budget? Is it going to real estate developers? Is it going to help Wall Street? We need budget justice because budgets, I say this all the time, they're moral documents, and I will not vote for a budget that does not support these issues. And I'll fight for it with our counterparts in Albany when they do their budgets. We need to make sure that, is that my time? So see, I get very fired up. But this is the passion we need going into city council. The time is ticking. We need to get this done now.
Agreed. Especially now, right? We needed this like decades ago, but if we're here now, we need it now. For sure.
Can I just back on really quick? I just want to say, if this pandemic taught us anything, it's that we have to put our resources into our most vulnerable communities. We have to stop funding the wealthy who have the means, the resources. I hope this pandemic taught us to lead with humanity. Right. That's what we need to do.
Yes, it's definitely taught us on the call. I hope it teaches everybody that part. So yes, next question. Thank you, Marty. Since 2003, by way of our environmental program, Gaia Renaissance, we have been the primary caretakers of Frank White Memorial Garden, located adjacent to our headquarters at 512, and have been responsible for developing the 6,000 square foot lot into a beautiful community garden. Within the Brotherhood Sister Soul, we have developed a new concept in community garden designed to attract and educate a new generation of environmentalists. In light of that, and also specifically our community garden in an urban context, our next question is about community gardens. So, Tita.
Hi, my name is Tita, and my question is, BroSis stewards the most used community garden in Manhattan. What do you believe is the role of community gardens, and how will you support them?
Thank you, Tita. And the order is Carmen, Ray, Sean, Marty, Dan, Stacy, Maria.
Well, thank you for that question, Tita. Actually, I am doing a community garden now, and it's beautiful. It's just awesome. The reason I decided really that it was necessary, again, the pandemic, right? And I think that when we talk about serenity and we talk about our children, we need to have a safe place for them. They need to learn what it is. I'm Puerto Rican, honey. We grew our food in Puerto Rico. Okay, and that's what we need to be teaching our children, what it is to get dirty and plant food and grow food, and knowing how to survive. Because when you teach them to grow food, you're teaching them to survive. And not only that, mental illness is running rapid in our community. And so that is one of the biggest things that we're facing now. Just 3 days ago, I had a jumper who jumped off of our roof, 70 years old. So there are a lot of issues that we need to be dressing, and that let me tell you, that garden is a safe haven. And you should see how our community has come together. I mean, young people, seniors, everybody. And I've got people coming from that don't live here in Douglas. We got outside people coming and bringing stuff. So yes, community gardens, girl, you got me on there, honey. We got to keep showing. We got to teach our children the value of growing food, where it comes from,
Right.
and how good it tastes when you do it with your own hands.
Thank you. Sean.
So community gardens are critical. My building is actually attached to one right now in Manhattan Valley. Community garden is multi-purpose, from knowing how to cultivate your food and seeing it from seeing it throughout the entire stages is something that's very informative. It's also a place where people come together um, from all walks of life. It also has a very sound environmental benefit, which I think is great. But I think what's going to be very important is also for the city to loosen bureaucratic restrictions for community gardens so that more of them can serve as local resources for food. I speaking to a lot of folks, and I've heard a lot about the bureaucratic aspect of it being a huge barrier to having these community gardens. So I want to learn more about what that's like and figure out ways to address those impacts. I've seen the impacts of Jenny's Garden in West Harlem as well, and the late Jenny, who does an amazing job at getting people together, and so we need more of them.
Thank you. Marty and then Dan.
Community gardens are just that. It's about community, right? I love, Sean mentioned Jenny's Garden. I love Jenny's Garden and Maggie's Garden and the Wicked Friendship Garden and the 111th Block Street Association, their garden. These are areas where people gather in community for food resources, for mental health care, for spiritual health care and well-being. We have 190 acres of parkland in District 7. Let's expand that into community gardens. We have the capability of putting green roof spaces, not only in NYCHA, but in other housing areas. Let's expand our green roof options and opportunities. Above 107th Street, there are no city-funded composting sites. That is wrong. Part of community gardens and environmental justice and parks and recreation is racial justice. So we need to make sure we're funding community gardens, funding these composting sites, not only on the street level, but on the roofs in communities that need them the most, because it's just about that community. And I agree with Sean. Let's knock this bureaucratic bull crap out and give people the resources so they can cultivate and grow their own food.
Thank you. Dan?
So I'm been a member of the West 111th Street Garden that Marty made reference to for a number of years, and we've done a lot of programming with a nonprofit in the neighborhood called Valley Restoration Local Development Corporation to bring in Grow NYC, which sponsors a number of farmers markets with school children over at PS 165. An opportunity for many of them, I think, as Carmen made reference in the beginning, for the first time, many of them actually have gotten their fingers dirty and actually put their hands in soil, which has been great for them. They're elementary school children sort of learning about the life cycle of food, and also gives people a real sense of where food comes from. It doesn't come in a box. It doesn't come, in a carton, or you buy it at the store. It actually gets grown by people, and often people who are underpaid and predominantly Black and brown. So the community gardens are critical, important. Also, as Marty made reference to about the community aspect, they do provide sort of safe havens. They're different from parks. I'm on a bunch of park organizations, Friends of Morningside Park, and I helped start another playground organization that supports parks. But they typically are sort of manicured spaces that we use and play in, but they're not really sort of meant for us to get our hands dirty and get in the soil. I also noticing the time, and I was just thinking, we're all talking about food. The fast is about to begin. So Ramadan Mubarak to your listeners as an acknowledgement of the holy month is about to begin. Thanks.
Thank you. Stacy and then Maria.
Great. I will try to be brief. I work very closely with an organization called Harlem Grown, and he has shown me, the executive director, Tony, has shown me the importance of community gardens, both as an environmental piece, right? and addressing food insecurity, but also a workforce component. His organization hires young adults from the community, kids that were unfortunately in the prison pipeline, and it has changed the trajectory of their life. So this is my commitment to the group on this call. As your next city council member, I will invest or find additional funding to invest in community gardens. I think it's critically important to invest in these community gardens. I think we also should identify a worker co-op so that there are worker community gardens, right? These community gardens become the pipeline for worker co-ops. And then finally, I want to push the Parks Department and the mayor's office to make it easier for local residents to open up community gardens.
Thank you. And Maria.
Yeah, so for many of you who don't know, I started a lot of my community work at a community garden. When I was at Columbia Secondary School, that's where I did a lot of community work. And I'll tell you one thing, it really makes an impact. And, as a person of color, a person from West Harlem, it makes an impact in growing up. So we need to expand community gardens. We need to make sure that we expand green spaces and we provide access to community gardens. And the reason for that is because we need to make sure to create access to fresh food. We need to break down our bureaucratic systems right now that don't allow us to create more community gardens. We need to create, a greater culture around composting and recycling that may seem small, but are a big impact to our community. As people of color, we do not grow up learning you have to recycle or you have to compost. It's a new culture. When I went to Columbia Secondary School and I went to that garden, that's something that I learned. And that's something that I brought back to my community at 3333 Broadway. It's something that we need to do together. And that's something that we can do collectively through a community garden as a community. Because as Marty said, that is the point. A community gardening is community, coming together and working with each other to create a sense of, empowerment with each other.
Thank you. Thank you all. I'm going to ask you all to bear with us until 6:45 so we can get to the last two questions and then close out. And if you can, great. If you can't, totally understandable. Just let us know. As again, there are various reasons why one would need to drop off the call right now. But our next question, I will also just begin. So our priority in all of our organizing work is to protect youth, amplify youth voices and demands of youth and marginalized communities more broadly. And also, lastly, to build power as well as agency in Black and Brown communities. And in our community, more specifically, if we're being entirely honest. When we joined the effort to legalize marijuana, it was with these goals in mind. And with the passing of the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act that some of you mentioned already, New York State is closer to repairing the harms caused by the war on drugs. And that said, it's imperative that whoever is elected into city council keeps an eye on implementation in New York City and make sure that the people who are most directly harmed by the war on drugs are the folks who benefit from this legalization. And so our next question is explicitly about legalization, and it's going to come from Ariana.
Hi all, my name is Ariana, and we here at BroSis want to know, what is your view on equitable marijuana legalization policies, and how will you work to ensure that marijuana regulation and the Taxation Act that was just passed at the state level is meaningfully institutionalized at a city level?
Thank you, Ariana. And the order is now Sean, Marty, Dan, Stacey, Maria, and Carmen.
Sorry, can you repeat the last question? I know it has to do with the institution, right? Can you repeat it one last time? My apologies.
Awesome. What is your view on equitable marijuana legalization policies, and how will you work to ensure that the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act that was just passed at the state level is meaningfully institutionalized at a city level?
Yeah, I think that what equitable marijuana legalization and the implementation looks like is making, like the way it was framed in the question, making sure that those that were harmed by it the most get the first, become the first ones to actually benefit from this legalization. We need to make sure that, folks who are arrested for it, that's entirely removed out of their history, their history, arrest history. We need to make sure that we're investing in Black and Brown business communities to make sure that they're the ones profiting from this as well. And to make sure that as part of that job pipeline that we're recruiting folks who are directly impacted by this but also new folks in communities of color who want to get involved in this emerging market. And making sure that from the city level, in terms of, I can use my oversight powers as a council member to make sure that folks are actually, following the law and making sure that that the law is being implemented as intended and designed by the state legislature.
Thank you. Marty?
So I spoke about this earlier a little bit, a reparations fund for our Black and Brown communities who have been most impacted by criminalization of being Black and brown, So the city gets 4% of the marijuana tax. That money should go into this reparations fund to help communities who have been impacted by the war on drugs have access to housing, home ownership, small business ownership, healthcare, education. We need to expunge all the records of people who have been arrested for this, release people from jail who have been arrested for this. And we can't talk about accountability without talking about the NYPD. We need the police commissioner needs to be a civilian, not a member of the NYPD. The CCRB rulings need to be binding. We need to make sure that the police are not continuing to criminalize something now that it is legal and decriminalized. So we need to really have oversight and make sure that we are looking out for and protecting the people who have been harmed by racist marijuana laws in the past. Just because the law has now passed doesn't mean it's going to change overnight. So we need to get really to the root of the issue. But the reparations fund is how I would start to tackle that.
Thank you. Dan and then Stacy.
Thanks, Ariana, for that question. I don't know if where my colleagues are broadly on this, but I actually think that the potential income from the sale of marijuana is wildly overblown. I am much more skeptical that a significant amount of income is going to be generated at all. And my concern is that if we tie too closely to repairing the damage that the drug wars wreaked on communities, particularly communities of color, to the funding that comes from the marijuana sales, we're going to shortchange communities that desperately need assistance on the premise that, well, we've got this fund and that should be enough. And that's not going to be the case. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it generates, hundreds of millions of dollars and the money is able to fund all of the things that we'd like to. But I'm very skeptical that that's going to be the case, in part because we've seen what happened on the West Coast, where not a lot of revenue was actually generated back into communities. And part of that, it was because of the lack of oversight, which Ariana's question gets at the heart at. We have to make sure that the licenses are distributed to people who were formerly impacted by the drug wars, and particularly that the ownership of those licenses is retained by people who were injured by the drug war. There's a tendency for large corporations to come in. Philip Morris is going to invest billions of dollars, and they're going to have people who will basically be straw men and women to control the licenses, but won't actually be benefiting from it.
Mm-hmm.
Has to be a lot of oversight of that particular aspect of it too, to make sure the communities that were harmed are the ones that are repaired.
Thank you.
I guess I'm out of time, but a lot more to say on that subject.
For sure. Thank you, Stacy, Maria, and then Carmen.
Yeah. I have to agree with Dan a little bit on this. I'm not sure if the state will have that pot of money to really reinvest and repair hundreds of years, right, of just harm to our communities. But I think it should be a part of the package, right? We need to look again holistically and overall, like, how do we really reinvest in our communities? And again, I agree with Dan. I think we really need to understand and have a serious oversight process, right? And that should include MWBEs, right? How we have MWBEs, a requirement that, there's like 30% of the business goes to MWBEs. I think we need to look at it from a very similar angle. It really boils down to where these licenses are going, ownership, and including the communities that have been harmed by this for so many years, like just including them in this process, number one, and ensuring that they are owners of some of the licenses that are being shared or granted to folks. But I do want to say one other thing. There's also an imbalance, right? The licenses, to be honest, will likely go to big corporations that Dan referred to earlier, because guess what? They can afford lobbyists. right? And they have access. So we need to look at that as well, like the amount of access that these communities don't have. How do we address that, not just on this issue, but other issues as well?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Maria, and then Carmen.
Yeah, so I was going to say exactly what Dan and Stacey are saying about, if you want equitable legalization, you need to make sure that licenses are actually going to people of color. They're going to people who have been harmed by the drug war and have been harmed by, being incarcerated because of this. So, that's where the root of this is, making sure that all revenue from this new market is going actually to these people, making sure that money from legalization is going towards our communities. And, like what was said before too, we need to make sure that we're removing any and all negative impacts of this from people's records. We also need to make sure we address the issues of police. We need to make sure that we're investing in our communities and that we're leading with our community. And ultimately, we need to ensure that all small businesses, all the businesses that come out of this go in, all the revenue go into our community, that we're not supporting big chain stores, we're not supporting corporations. And the reality is that there will be lobbyists, there will be people who come in and want to be the monopoly. But as a city council, we can have some oversight from around this. We need to come together as a coalition and fight against this. We need to make sure that we're providing these licenses to the minority and the people of color in our community.
Thank you. And then Carmen.
Honey, let me tell you something. I don't agree with Dan on a lot of things, but you hit it right on the nose, Dan. And it's very true. It's all about transparency.
Mark this day.
Yeah, we're marking this day, Dan.
Make sure you mark it. and again, it's really about transparency, opening the books and seeing where everything is at. Where is it going? Who's it going to? Right? The corruption is deep, man. Let's be for real. Every little thing is a little corrupt. We got a lot of, of elected officials that are going to have their hands in the pot. And that is something we have to be careful of. We have to watch what is going on. We have to have a watchdog. And I'm a watchdog, boy. I watch everything. I'm telling you, I don't back down from nothing. And I don't, that's why people say I'm crazy, but no, we definitely have to watch. I agree with everything. Maria, you are just so cute. But I agree definitely with my colleagues on this one. This is something we're gonna have to really watch because, honey, the corruption is deep.
Agreed.
Can I add to what Carmen said really quickly?
I want to say yes, but I can't because
that's all right.
I really again. I hate being the president.
No, that's all right. That's all right. You're the boss. You're the boss.
To more conversation at a different point in time.
I'm sorry. Let me interrupt. I have to leave. Yes. I have a TV show to do. It's been a blast, baby. My number is 347-499-0025. Call me anytime. I'll say it again. 347-499-0025. Call me, baby girl. And again, thank you all to my colleagues. You guys are awesome. I really have so much respect for you, especially you, Maria. You're young, and I love it. I love it. You have a lot of guts, and I really, really applaud you, Nana.
Thank you. Yeah,
so have a blessed day.
You too.
All right, Carmen. Take care.
And so our last question, and my apologies to Maria and Dan. We did have follow-up questions for you, but because of time, we could not get to them. So I will start with you, Dan, and then go to Maria, and then we'll close. But the question is actually a closeout question, right? So thank you all for your time and your thoughtful answers to all of our questions. And just for sitting with us and talking through some of the major issues in our communities and also some of the ideas around solutions and visioning, more broadly speaking. Our final question is, why are you running for this seat? And what in your background makes you qualified to lead this district in the city council? So starting with Dan and then Maria, and then I'll list the order.
Actually, as a thought exercise, actually be funny if we each said it for each other, because we've done so many of these seminars. I could tell why Stacy's doing it, and Maria could talk about why Marty's doing it. So, I'm born and raised in the neighborhood. I've lived here my entire life, 50 years. And I went to local public schools, and my son goes to public school here in the district now too. For the past 10 years, I've been working for not-for-profits on affordable housing, which is the #1 issue in the district, and certainly something we've talked about a little bit before. And as a kid, I grew up in the neighborhood, going to local schools, playing in parks, using the public transportation, and becoming aware as an adult about how widely different those resources are, how different they are in terms of distribution of resources, and how different they are in terms of their accessibility. And one of the reasons I'm running for city council is to be the champion for the community I've always called my home, but also to make sure that the same resources that I had as a kid are widely available to everyone in the district and in the city. That's what I would do if I got elected to the city council. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. And note, just for balance, I'm not putting a timer on you or Maria, but I will put a timer on other folks.
I saw
Maria,
that. Thank you.
because okay, Maria, you work.
Thank you for no timer. It relieves the pressure. Yeah, no more pressure on that. So I am running for city council because, for far too long, working class New Yorkers have not been represented in our local government, in our state government, in our federal government. And now is a time for us to have a seat at the table. We need to fight for truly affordable housing. We need to fight for housing justice, education justice, environmental justice, a just recovery from COVID-19, and for a transformation of our criminal justice system. I am a lifelong resident of West Harlem, where I was born and raised, and I've been directly impacted by gentrification, by the lack of funding of public schools. And I've seen how it is immensely important that we have someone in office who has organized in this community, who understands the lived experiences of District 7, and will be there to speak up for District 7 and not be attached to real estate, corporate interests, or in institutions like Columbia University. We need someone to be a voice for District 7, someone who will understand what we have lived through, who knows what it means not to have hot water, who knows what it means not to have an elevator and live on a 29th floor and then have to walk down and go to school. It is really important that we have someone who understands District 7 and can be a voice for our community in City Hall.
Thank you, Maria. The remainder of folks, you have 1 minute and 30 seconds. More time. See, almost fairness. And so we're going to start with Marty and then go to Stacy and then end with Sean.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you to everyone for your questions. And Marcia, we've done a lot of these forums and you have been the best moderator, keeping us in check. So thank you. I am so excited to be in this race. I'm proud that I'm the first non-binary candidate in New York history, and hopefully will become the first non-binary elected. But I got into this race because I was tired of hearing politicians make promises and not following through. I moved to New York when I was 17. I'm almost 34 now. I got to work right away because the city, I could not afford it. So I had to get to work right away. And I know what it's like so many millions of New Yorkers, when the first of the month comes around, what bill is going to get paid and what isn't. I'm a gig worker who lives paycheck to paycheck and gig to gig. That's why I'm fighting for these values, so we can have everybody have access to good quality resources, right? And I mentioned my struggles with addiction. I remember what it was like having to steal toilet paper from bar bathrooms and fruit from bodegas, and knowing that struggle. So we need to make sure that people are provided food, provided social services. That's why I'm in this. This is a grassroots movement. We have the most in-district donors, the most money raised, the most endorsements, and I'm proud of that because we've been on the ground doing the work, and we'll continue to do the work no matter the outcome of this election, because we should all be running to be of service to our neighbors. And that's why I'm in this fight, to work for every single person, all 179,000 people in this district, block by block, from 96th to 165th, because we need voices in office who have the lived experience and who will do the job and not bow down to the real estate development industry, to Columbia University, and to people who want to continue to take from the community. I think that's my time. I apologize for going over.
You're fine. Thank you. Stacy.
All right, Marsha. I promise I'll be on time.
Okay.
Let me start by sharing a story about Brotherhood, Sister Soul. About 20 years ago, my neighbor, Denise Andrew, told me about this amazing program that she enrolled her son in, called Brotherhood Sister Soul. It was located in a brownstone on Hamilton Place, run by a smart brother named Gary White. And 20 years later, Denise's son, Sidney Andrews, graduated from college and is earning his degree in engineering, right? His master's degree. And her niece, Chelsea, also is attending and about to graduate from college. And so Denise attributes most of Sidney's success to Brotherhood Sister Soul, right? I witnessed firsthand what love, what support, what education and creating a healthy, safe space can do for a child, which is why I received the endorsements from UFT, councils of supervisors, and the chair of the education committee, State Senator John Liu. I have a proven track record, both in and out of government, of fighting for our communities each and every day. And listen, let me tell you, I appreciate what Brotherhood Sister Soul does and continue to do for both of our kids and our community. We need representation, not just in government, but in our communities that really care about communities. And I'm that person. In addition to that, I want to represent our district, right? And reflect, we need to have representation that actually reflects the district. And so when and if elected, I'll be the first woman to ever represent District 7, right? And District 7, guess what? Has a population of over 55% women. So I think it's time that we elect a woman to represent this district. Thank you.
Thank you. And Sean, you're on mute.
Dan, you already closed?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't do that. So I'm Sean Abreu, and I'm fighting for
All I
home.
did was talk about you, Sean.
I know. I love you too, Dan. I'm fighting for home. This is the place, I've known my whole life. There are some folks here like, Dan, Stacy, and, Maria have been here their whole lives, and, fighting to bring, really, services to our community. I think, all of us are all, very qualified in this room to do the job. I went from, as I've said before, from being evicted as a child to graduating from Columbia University, and becoming a tenant rights attorney. I was a struggling public school student in Washington Heights. I attended public school in Washington Heights on 160th Street at PS4. I attended Crossroads in Manhattan Valley in the PS 165 building, and I went to Columbia in the dead center of the district. I think that, I have the perspective and the shared lived experiences of so many families in this district. And I think that perspective, combined with my professional experience as a tenants rights attorney, I think makes me uniquely prepared to deliver for tenants in housing court. But again, I'm very excited. We have a lot of endorsements, but at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the people of Council District 7 and doing the work and getting our message out. And I think that the biggest endorsement comes from the people. And so I'm excited to be there working the vote from now through Election Day. And may the best, we all give it our all, and may the outcome be what it is.
Thank you. Thank you all of you for your time and for meeting with us. And thank you also to all the Liberation Program members and Brotherhood Sister Soul folks who put in time to pull the questions together, to register folks, to ensure that folks show up.
Can I add one more thing? Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
I just want to tell all of you that don't let anyone tell you no. I'm 21 years old, and I don't know if you are close to my age or not. It did not matter that I was 21. I declared when I was 20, so that was even younger. So it did not matter what age I was to run for office. You only need to be 18. And here I am around people who are possibly twice my age. I'm looking at you, Dan.
Whoa, Maria.
If you're going to say it right, I'm actually
Maria.
2.5 times your age.
Oh, Dan, you look good.
I'm 50,
Dan, you look good.
right?
Dan.
So, if I'm going to be the old guy, at least get my number right.
Listen.
Duly noted and much appreciated. The Liberation Program is a youth organizing, youth activism space, and so always excited to hear folks who are supporting youth-led power and building agency, and also just realizing that youth are leaders of today, right? And so excited about all of your candidacy and excited about what happens when any of you is elected, because we know that from what you said today, we seem on page with a lot of things. And so excited about the future for District 7 and for our community overall. And if you have anything to share, or if you want to continue the conversation, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll find a way to do that, because as long as we care about our communities, like, we will win, and we will ensure that New York is inhabitable for all of us. And so thank you all.
Wonderful.
Thank
you all.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
And Maria, I'm gonna call you about that.
Take care, everybody.
All right. Take care.
Ciao.
Bye.